Welcome, bienvenidos. This is Roxana from MetamorphosisRox, the place to be where you want more than tea. Yes, the old phrase is back, especially on situations like the one we're going to be discussing today. Now, this is part one. I honestly don't know how many parts there will be to it. I can guarantee you a part two because I am going to read the entire leaked document, and I have some points to make about that as well. But today I wanted to focus on the initial reactions and the reactions of the last 3 days for people that have read it and people that haven't read it, and why this is important. Because I think people go down party lines and forget there are more issues than just abortion rights. So let's start with the fact that for those of you who don't know and haven't seen the news or have been on vacation or don't have access to internet for 3 or 4 days or are smart enough not to have Twitter, the U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts confirmed that the leaked draft of the abortion decision is authentic orders investigation. Now, this was what happened on Tuesday or Wednesday after Monday night when the famous document leaked. The document was a document written by Judge Alito, and yes, he white, where he was outlining the reasons why they were overturning Roe v. Wade. And for those of you who don't know, Roe v. Wade was a historical decision signed into law. I mean, not signed into law, a historical decision made by the Supreme Court, which ended abortions being considered a crime in the United States of America and all 50 states. So it was a big moment for women's liberations movement, which is what was called back in the day. And it was a protection, for lack of a better word, for women to be able to have safe and healthy procedures done. Now, one of the things that I want you to understand is that eliminating Roe v. Wade is not only bad for women, it's also bad for Republicans who have been campaigning on taking down Roe v. Wade for 49 years. They're about to go into midterms right now, and they just lost their biggest point of fundraising, to be honest with you, because you see, as most things happen in political arena, they decide to turn everything into a religious issue in the case of the Republicans, just to make sure that people will sign with them. So what I'm going to show you is a couple of things that happened during the last few days, what my reactions are, and I'm going to try to keep an even kill. I can't promise you anything because I have very strong feelings about this. Plus, if you were paying attention on Twitter, you know why I'm so upset about this. In a personal level, has nothing to do with my ability to have children. I don't have that ability anymore, thank God. But it does affect me personally. I'm not going to get into it in this video, but let's just say that this really puts into perspective the fact that when I was a young girl, I always wanted to leave the world better than I found it. And I find this to be one of those instances where I'm leaving a world for my daughter that is a lot worse than the world I came into. So, having said that, let's look at some of the things we found on the internet and let's discuss, shall we? Before I go into the Republican reaction, I would like to let you know that in case you're thinking that because I vote mostly Democrat, I'm not going to call them out, wait your turn. You will be surprised to find out that yes, they have a lot to pay for on this one too. But let's start with the Republican reaction, because let me be very clear. If I had spent the last 49 years praying, hoping, campaigning on a particular outcome, and I found out that that particular outcome is about to come true, I would be celebrating, shouting from the rooftops. And these people have all concentrated on investigating a leak of this document. Now, don't take me wrong. I think they should investigate the leak. I just find it funny that we have been listening to the last 2 years how this particular justice in this particular court is married to somebody that actively aided, including monetarily, for the insurrection of January 6th, and yet there is no investigation or possible impeachment of said justice, who, let's not forget, skated on by even though there were allegations of improper behavior for him. Then again, that seems to be something very popular with several other members of this particular Supreme Court. But they're more concentrated on how this is going to erode the trust in the SCOTUS, aka the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, I don't know about you, I have never had a lot of faith in a body of law, I guess I should call it, where one of the people that was recently added has several accusations of misconduct, where you have another person that was completely unqualified for the position that was basically rammed through, and we call her Madame Handmaid's Tale for a reason. It just baffles the imagination that you think that I am going to feel safe with a governing body that is composed of 6 people who are right or conservative. Also, there's 7 of them, 7 members of this particular group of people are Catholic. I believe there's 9 in total. 7 are Catholic. Now, I was born and raised Catholic. I wouldn't thrust them as far as I could throw them. It is what it is. But I just find it very interesting that the Republican Party is more concentrated on, oh my God, who did the leak, than they are on celebrating their accomplishment. And that goes back to what I mentioned, that they have spent the last 49 years campaigning on this, have gotten a lot of money out of a lot of people who seem to be obsessed with other people's bodies and what they do in their spare time, and yet they're not celebrating because they realize, what are we going to campaign on for the next 3 years? Yeah, that. Before I read Josh Gad's post, I want you to know that I am aware that not everybody that is called a woman is affected by this law, but for the purposes of this video and the videos on this series, I am going to talk about women's rights. We all know it's actually human rights, but anyway, he said, make no mistake, a majority in this country are angry tonight. Not a small majority, a giant majority. I am seeing that rage. I'm hearing that rage. I am feeling that rage. And to all scared women tonight, I will fight for you and with you. I will fight like hell. We all must. And let me just add this. The faith of any marginalized country in white people at this particular point in time is very much perilously close to being non-existent for many reasons, some of which I want to get on in other parts of the series. But let's just say that even though that's true, I feel a little comfort with this. I do. I actually do. Now, somebody posted, I've never met a pro-life person who was actively doing anything to help systemic access to medical care, education, or social services for poor mothers and their unwanted children. This is a thread. I just copied this first one. And I should say Jen Richards was the one who said it. And I quote tweeted that by saying, I would add to this that I have never met a pro-life person who is pro-gun control, especially in the classroom. And the reason why I brought that up is because it's amazing to me how women have to jump through hoops, or any person that is pregnant has to jump through hoops to get an abortion. But a person can go to a store and buy a gun, do a background check maybe, and get a gun. And we have schools where some idiot thinks that because we have armed guards, we're going to stop people from shooting other people. You're an idiot, by the way. I would not want my kids to go to a school where there were guns. But this goes back to the whole idea that George Carlin was the one who brought it up, that the right wing, the GOP, the Republicans, whatever you want to call them, have this amazing interest on children before they are born, and when they hit 18 years old, basically saying that we want to keep them alive so we can have them killed in war. It is really scary how this goes into many different aspects, which I'm going to touch on part 2. But let's just say this for the sake of this moment. I don't see any of these people, and I just watched a video where some ladies were like, choose adoption, not abortion. But then when asked if any of them had ever adopted, they said no. And I have a lot of information on why it's so hard to adopt in the United States. But let's just, that's going to be on another segment of this. But let's just leave it at this. Adoption is not an option for most people in the United States. It just isn't. So coming with that crap to me, no, that's not going to work. Do better. While you're at it, you should actually consider the medical benefits, how we treat our people when they don't have a house, when they don't have money. We don't care that they make $7 an hour. We fight because we don't think they deserve a decent living wage, but we want to keep more people coming into this planet. Okay. It never ceases to amaze me who ends up with a blue check mark. Sometimes I have to spend hours trying to figure out who this person is. In the case of Amanda Duarte, I have no idea who she is. All I know is that she's a comedian and a writer. I also know that right before, when this whole thing exploded, she decided to make a very interesting tweet, which is the subject of this next one, which I'm about to read first. I said something insanely and awful and stupid on Twitter last night. The intent does not matter, so I will not attempt to defend or explain it. It was racist and has had racist impact. I'm terribly sorry to anyone and everyone who read it and who were hurt by it. Love it when somebody decides to apologize by saying, sorry if I offended you. We continue. I deleted my account briefly because I wasn't sure of the right thing to do, and I knew that it wasn't and isn't to try to answer for what I said. I know a lot of people are angry and looking to tell me why, so I am reactivating it because I think that is important. Please know that I am deeply, deeply sorry, and there is anything I can do to repair the damage of this, please do let me know. Thank you. Now, I don't know where these people always think that closing down their account or shutting down in a particular platform and just leaving the rest of them open is, or hiding, let's call it what it is, hiding after doing something incredibly horrible. Because I'm okay if you decide to take a break because a lot of people are attacking you or whatnot, or because you just said something relatively innocuous and people are just gaining up on you. I can totally understand taking a break from social media. I can understand taking a break from social media just because the bad news are so many and so quick that you're like, oh my god, I'm overwhelmed, I need a break. I can totally understand that. But you did something wrong, and when I read you what you wrote, you will understand why I say you did something wrong. And your first idea is, I'm gonna delete my account. What? No ma'am. Stay and face the music. You had the balls to write what you wrote. Stay and face the music. You're not giving us a great honor by coming back. You should have never left. You should have taken it. If you had the balls to say what you did, you should have taken it. So what was so horrible? I do wonder how these white supremacist lawmakers would feel if their little white daughters were raped and impregnated by black men. Oh my god, when I tell you, I'm just like, what? And the thing that gets me about this story is not just the fact that she made an incredibly racist remark. What gets to me is, of course, and the first thing I showed you was a comment that I saw on Twitter of somebody saying, I want to see who's the first black person that defends this. But as usual, some white knight had to come and rescue this girl by saying, we need to accept that all of us are flawed and allow people to apologize and move on. Hopefully these are learning moments. I'm sorry. What? No, no. And you'll see why I'm saying no this whole time, because you're about to see the second part to this particular conversation, because I decided to take the whole conversation. Now, this was an answer to somebody saying apologizing means nothing if that statement actually formed in your mind and traveled through your fingers into a tweet. You appear to be remorseful, and that's good, but it's hard to tell if it's because you said it or because you got caught. And here is my issue with this. At what point did Amanda think it was a good idea to bring up race in this situation? And mind you, we are all aware of why white people are being supposedly doing all of this, okay? Watch The Handmaid's Tale if you need an idea. But the bottom line is this. Even if we know that this is about trying to increase the amount of white children versus people of color, even if that is true, even if that's part of this whole thing, which I will get to in another moment, why did you have to say the thing you said the way you said it? You could have just said, yeah, when they find their girls going out with boys that are not white, then that, and I would have understood that. But no, she had to say two things: black men and had the R word. Why? Why? I just want to know why. So the Empress Sunflower, who is the white knight in this situation, goes, oh, after a conversation with our friend, says, I agree, I'm just tired of cancel culture and all the shenanigans taking place to divide us further. Let me be very clear about this. Cancel culture, I'm tired of people calling it cancel culture. Calling you out on your bullcrap is not cancel culture. Asking for you to take accountability, responsibility for what you said is not canceling somebody. And more importantly, why is it that when one side does it, it's okay, and when the other side does it, it's cancel culture? Because I can't help but notice that the people who are so offended by cancel culture, aka the Republicans, are literally canceling Disney right now. They canceled Target and Starbucks at one point because they wanted to be more inclusive. Every time somebody does something you don't like, you automatically try to cancel them. But cancel culture, shut up. There is no such thing as cancel culture. What cancel culture really is that you are making a fuss out of somebody that did something wrong in your eyes. Some people are right and some people are wrong, and I'm not going to get into which side is what. But let me be very clear. Let me take Disney for example, and I'm just going to talk about this for a minute. Let me be very clear that Republicans had no problem when they took a story about a Native American young girl, because Pocahontas was not even 14, and made it into a love story with a 30-year-old white man. What? You don't think there's a problem with that? You have pretty much every princess from Snow White to Cinderella to, not Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty. All these girls are underage. All of them. Because I believe Snow White was 14 and the other one was 13 or 14. And you see nothing wrong with 20-something-year-old men wanting to marry 13-year-old girls. Mind you, when these stories were originally written, that's the way the world worked. But when we know better, we do better. And right now, trying to marry a 20-year-old to a 14-year-old is a crime. Yes, I'm aware that some politicians want to change that, but until that happens, and by the way, just because it happens doesn't make it less wrong. You're still abusing a minor. Yeah, no. You had no problem with Disney doing that. None at all. You had no problem with any of the crazy things that happen in as far as gaslighting and priorities. I mean, let's face it, how many centuries did Disney sell the story that the only way you could be happy is if you found your prince? Some people still believe that crap. You had no problem with that. But the minute they started standing up for the LGBTQ community, oh, now you have a problem. See where I'm talking about when I say hypocritical? That's what I meant. The last example I'm going to give you is from a book Ron Paul wrote. And in it he said, on one occasion in the 1960s, when abortion was still illegal, I witnessed, while visiting a surgical suite as an OBGYN resident, the abortion of a fetus that weighed approximately 2 pounds. It was placed in a bucket, crying and struggling to breathe, and the medical personnel pretended not to notice. Soon the crying stopped. This harrowing event forced me to think more seriously about this important issue. Now, this is an excerpt from a book called Liberty Defined by a person that is now a member of the U.S. government, Ron Paul. And here's my issue as I show you this again. He said the baby was approximately 2 pounds, which would mean that the baby would have been about 6 months inside the belly. What is that? 6 times 4 is 24 weeks in the belly. The only problem with that is that in order for you to be able to cry, meaning a baby crying, or a fetus for that matter, you would have fully functioning lungs. And that doesn't happen until you have 36 weeks of gestation. So can somebody explain to me how a baby that was still 12 weeks before cooking, let's call it a baby because they refuse to understand that that's not a baby. Yeah. A baby that is 12 weeks away from 36 weeks is capable of screaming and crying and gasping for air. Now, that also makes an important distinction, and that is the fact that if you are incapable of functioning so much as breathing outside a human body, you're not a human. Bottom line it. It is what it is, Mr. Paul. So, yeah, it might have been a traumatic experience for him. I'm not doubting that, okay? I'm not doubting that seeing all that blood and that gore when that happens caused this whole situation. But I still have a big problem with the idea that there was a baby screaming outside of a belly when said fetus, because by his own admission it was a fetus, was not even old enough to have fully functioning lungs. There are many thoughts that went through my head when this first started, and I will go more into detail on part 2 of this. But I wanted to make some points very clear because it just annoyed me. Number one, this particular post that somebody said about how Republican, and it's not just Republicans, it's anybody in any position of authority that is married and has a family and whatnot, they will do anything to get rid of anything that goes against their plans. But they want to tell you how to live your life and how to do your thing. This is not just about the fact that abortion rights this or that or the other. I have my own opinion about abortion. I would never have an abortion for myself, but I'd be damned if I'm going to tell somebody else what to do with their body. Because, you see, here's the issue. We had a big discussion over my body, my choice about vaccines and masks, which affect nobody, but might impact everybody in a positive way, meaning there's no longer any contagious disease going around the planet. But now when it's abortion, now all of a sudden we have a problem. This brings other issues into the forefront because everybody's like, well, don't panic, because what that means is that now it's up to the states. Well, we already have 2 states, Oklahoma and Texas, who have signed laws already telling people when they can have an abortion and when they cannot. Just remember that both states have Republican leaders and that the Republican Party is supposed to stand for less government intrusion into my personal life. Yeah, really, as we've seen, hypocritical to the core. But let's continue with this discussion because that's not the only problem. If you haven't noticed, there's a lot of conversations about individuals and companies who have decided to make a fortune out of giving information that they're not supposed to be giving out. Like, for example, this dude here who decided that he was going to sell information about women's menstrual periods and other data that he had collected. The advice that we have been given through all social media at this point is that if you have any app that is tracking your monthly cycles, completely eliminate it out of your phone, because they can get that information and use that information to find you. Now, other reasons why this is problematic is because it calls into question other laws that have been passed in this country that the SCOTUS had anything to do with. In Virginia versus Loving, for example, which essentially eliminated discrimination against couples of mixed different races marrying, because, by the way, a white man being in love with a black woman was illegal to the point where they were punished severely. I'm not even getting into whether or not they were abused, beaten, harassed, bullied. No, they were legally incarcerated for this. It also calls into question, obviously, the ability of gay men, lesbians, and anybody marry anybody they love, because love is love. And that is what we're already seeing people asking, oh, well, then maybe the Supreme Court should revise this or revise that and the other. And little by little, everybody's going to lose more rights, because that's all these people care about. Which brings up the question, which was my first thought when I saw this whole thing, is, why the hell are you getting involved in my personal life? I do believe the Constitution, and again, this is going to be on part 2, where I'm actually going to read not only the document that Alito wrote, but I'm also going to read the Constitution, because I could have sworn there is an issue of privacy here. I could have sworn there's a law called HIPAA, which tells you that you have no right to check my medical records, and that nobody should talk about my medical records with anybody, which, by the way, would mean that the people in Texas that talked about the young girl that was arrested could end up paying her millions because they broke HIPAA law. Okay? Just saying. Those are some of the things that go through my head, because at the end of the day, we all think this is all fun and games because it doesn't affect us personally, but yes, it does. And when I said that I was also going to throw some at the Democrats, why is Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats giving support to a candidate in Texas that is anti-abortion? And before you tell me, well, he's Latino and they decided to support Latino people, the person that is running, opposing him, Cisneros, she's also Latino. So that's not a good excuse. Don't give me that crap. The reality is that as a Latino woman, well, first of all, a Latino woman, a bisexual Latino woman, a 55-year-old Latino woman with a 30-year-old Latino daughter who passes for white according to y'all standards, and you all know how I feel about the pass for white crap. But let's be real for a second. And this is what bothers me, is that we don't have anybody. We don't. I don't know if you remember this, but when the white women decided to do the march with the little hats that looked like private parts, they wouldn't even allow marginalized women communities to speak on the rallies, which made us very aware of the fact that we didn't count. It was just about white women and their rights. And up to a point, it is just about women and their rights, because at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is increase the amount of white children coming into this world. But here's the problem with that theory, is that we all have to pay for that. Because if abortions are illegal, and this is the part that y'all just don't understand for some reason, but if abortions are illegal, that's not going to stop abortions. That's just going to make it harder for women to survive them. And at the end of the day, If your precious white women are doing the coat hanger thing all over again, guess what that means? Less white babies. So you're shooting yourself on the foot. But on part 2, we're going to discuss the Alito situation. We're also going to look at the Constitution. And if you like what you see here, please show us some love. Press that like button, subscribe, and in the meantime, have a great day. Thank you for watching.